We have it. We have it. So, welcome everyone to ROSH-ESTHER number. I don't know how long, how much. This mini series within a series within a series called The Names of God. Today we are going to go into the depth of yet another name of God. Not Adonai Ehyeh and not that trio. But let us start with our song of prayer and then continue from where we will be and are at. So I hope by now you're starting to know the song, and maybe, I don't know, the final project of every person here will be to show us if your wings have already started growing. Maybe they're showing their first feathers. I don't know. What color are your feathers? What color are your wings of spirit? I have no idea. Ben Adam, wait, we have to actually share screen with our people, with our folks on Zoom, right? It's not very polite that they can't sing with us. So let's try to do that because we love you guys that are on Zoom. We love you. We're so glad that you're actually able to join us this week. All right, here we go. Ben Adam. כוח אז לך, יש לך כנפי רוח, יש לך כנפי רוח, כנפי נשרים אבירים, אל תכחש בה, פן יכחשו לך, דרוש אותם, דרוש בן אדם, וימצאו לך. It's so nice to feel that you all are already singing the song. All you have to do is repeat it a few weeks, and you guys are already. And I can then harmonize with the second voice. The next step will be to teach you the harmony. So wonderful! How great it is that we are singing this beautiful song with the lyrics that have been written by Rabbi Cook and the melody that was composed by this anonymous, semi-anonymous Orthodox woman who composed it and then didn't want anyone to know that it was her, because she's Orthodox and she doesn't like to sing to anyone who's not like her close circle of girlfriends. And everybody started singing this song in Israel, and it became really famous. And it was recorded by a few artists, and nobody knew who it was from. And now we know because somebody found her in some religious neighborhood. But we still don't know who she is. We just know her name. So at least we have her name, which is Avigail Uziel Amar. But we don't know a lot about her. Anyways, so yeah, let us do some meditation. And I'd like to ask a leading question as we start this meditation today. Just I'll do very open meditation. I'll just give us a few instructions, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to just be with this word God. And kind of like every time your word wanders, your mind wanders, and your words, but just kind of like breathe in the word God and breathe out the word God, and like see what happens to you. Okay, that's like the exercise. Like all the atheists in the room, it's fine. You can be an atheist too doing this exercise, right? Just kind of like see where it takes us. But let's just prepare ourselves for that a little bit, and to make sure that we're sitting in a comfortable and conscious way. So that happens a lot when we start to sit in a conscious way, that we have a cough or a discomfort because we become aware of our body, aware of our being a creature that lives in the world inside a body. Let's make sure that our feet are touching the ground and that we are sitting as straight as we can, letting our body rest on Mother Earth, rest in the seat that we're sitting on. Remembering that there's a huge, huge universe around us. Knowing that we are stardust. And that the light that sparks within our soul is part of the energy that has been there since the Big Bang. And maybe even before that. And let us now also notice our breath. Just a natural breath, don't have to change anything, but notice it. How we constantly inhale and exhale since the moment we're born to the day we die. That's what we do. We breathe. And feel the air filling your lungs, filling your stomach, filling your body, and leaving it. And with every breath, we can take from the universe, from the cosmic universe that created us, something that is beneficial and good for our existence in this planet, in our life. And with every exhale, we can release something that is not beneficial to who we are, but is part of us. You don't even have to know a specific thing. Just making this intention suffices for the exercise. Notice the sensations in your body. Are they pleasant or unpleasant, and where? If there's a place of tension, try to release that. Maybe breathe into that part. And the same goes to our emotional well-being today. Let's just feel our heart for a little bit. So if there's a pleasant sensation, feeling, emotion in our heart, or an unpleasant one. We can breathe and observe and breathe that. And the same goes to our stream of thoughts, the stream of the river of thoughts that comes and goes, it appears from somewhere. Where does it appear from? Thoughts come through our mind's eye and leave or don't leave. Let us just notice that river of thought. Knowing that we are not any of these thoughts. These thoughts are within us, but none of them defines us. As we observe, try to observe the observer. Who is that within us that observes all these sensations, emotions, thoughts, desires? And as we are going deeper into our place of self-awareness and focus, I'll echo the question that I started with, the meditation with, saying, this word or idea or concept of God, where does that meet you today in this very moment? And so, whatever it is, wherever you are in your journey today, with these concepts echoing in your life experience and knowledge or questions, life vibrations, it's all good, all good. And I invite us to say the Shema together. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And now let us say the blessing for studying Torah together. May this time that we dedicate to the Torah of study and the spiritual Kabbalistic tradition, as part of the Jewish tradition, be beneficial to our own self-growth and development, to our loved ones, to this community, and to everyone else around us who is in need of anything at all. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So, before I go into the next name of God that I'd like to share with you, we've talked about this triad of Adonai, Yud Hey Vav Hey Ehyeh in the past few meetings. I'd like to move on to another name. Not that we can't talk about that more, but move on and maybe get back to that another time. So before we do that, would anyone either here in the room or on Zoom would like to share any experience or thoughts that you had when we meditated upon the word God? Here, pass the mic.
I found it very peaceful, and I had a stressful day, so it felt good.
So God is peaceful and good even in a peaceful day. Thank you. Let's pass the mic. And if you don't want to speak, just pass the mic. Closer.
Serenity.
Would you like to share something that you felt when we meditated on the word God?
Just think of a creator of such a gigantic universe, and then he made us. It's wonderful that we're here.
Ain't
We
it?
can enjoy
Ain't it
all the
wonderful?
things that we enjoy every day.
Yeah, all right.
That's our God.
That's a very positive God. All encompassing and positive. I like that. Anyone else?
Trying to figure out how to put it into words, but how to put it into words. When I meditate on God, I feel God is our teacher, protector, and who loves us. I felt very small.
I felt for a moment the center, maybe of myself, of the universe, and the sense of it flowing out in all directions from the center. It's a beautiful place to be. Annihilation. I thought how confusing it is for God to be both unknowable and a comforting presence.
Some of the paradoxes, right? Some of the paradoxes of the divine. Thank you. We could, if anyone here wants to speak, or we'll just pass the mic back here. Thank you. Did you want to say something? You're good. You're good. Okay. Anyone on Zoom would like to share with us?
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can't see you because your camera is off, but we can hear you.
We don't know why that's happening. I'm sorry. But yes, well, I have a lot of trouble with the word God, but I don't have a lot of trouble with God as the creator. So we're lucky where we live. We look out on woods and we see sunsets at night and birds flying. And that's the God I can connect with, the creator God.
Beautiful. Too bad your camera isn't working. You could have shown us the woods, but I guess I'll wait another time. But we do know how you look like, so it's fine. Anyone else on Zoom? Oh yeah, here in the room, yeah. Go ahead.
I think that I certainly connect with what Lone has just said about the miracle of the spring. But I feel conflicted because I think God made some really big mistakes.
Yeah.
And that, I get pissed.
Yeah, so angry at God, disappointed in God. That exists too. Amazing. Well, the biggest mistake God made was to create human beings, right? We're like, God had other aspirations for us, you know. It's like, these annoying creatures, right? They keep not understanding the message. All right, so yeah, so thank you for sharing. We really, the word God is so loaded, for better and for worse, and it really can mean a lot of different things to different people, and even a lot of different things to the same person throughout life, even from one moment to another sometimes, right? So it's not that there's right and wrong answers here. It's just that we're trying to kind of like collect raindrops or morning dew of wisdom from our all of us, right? To kind of resonate this in our human experience. So anyone else on Zoom before we go on with to the next step here?
Yeah, I'll add something. Good evening. It's interesting because I think of God as like a protector, and I thank God for, looking out for us and protecting us when needed. But then, like somebody was just saying how angry they are, it's like, if I think of God as a protector, then why are there still hostages in Israel? And, and so I guess it's the same dichotomy and the two sides, like why are some protected and others not? So I don't know.
Yeah, one might argue that it's not God who took those people hostages, and it's again like we can, not that I'm like God's advocate or anything, like
You
I
should
mean,
be.
I don't work for God. I work for the board of the synagogue, so but basically, just to say that a lot of times people are angry at God, blaming God for things that human beings have done, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like and it's like, oh, I'm angry at God, but hey, God is not the one who kills, murders, rapes, kidnaps, robs, lies, right, etc., etc. So you can be angry at God, but it's really a lot of those things. I'd say
But
most
it's
of the
funny.
humans have done. Yeah.
If that is so, then why am I thankful when I'm protected or when I feel God has saved
Yeah.
me from injury or something? So it's like, is it God saving me or is it,
Right.
oh,
It's a
interesting.
good question. It's a good question, right? So we don't have all the answers. It is interesting though to notice that. Um, anyone else? All right. So it is interesting to notice that really God means a lot of things. Like, and there's a classical names of God, like the protector, the merciful, the strong, the loving, the compassionate, the just, the right, many, which is also just even before we get into any specific name of God, is that just to understand the importance of the plurality of the names of God in our tradition. Once again, we're like in a mini course in which we're learning about just a tiny bit of the many names of God that we have in our tradition. And again, traditionally, there are 70 names for God. And again, I've never seen the full list. And it seems like, and I'm repeating things I've already said, but they're worth repeating, that in some ways, the actual name of God is silence, and no name is the name of God. And if you want to take it to the other direction, every word we ever utter is a name of God, or at least potentially so. Every vibration, every combination of sounds, including the goo goo gaga of a baby, right, can be the name of God. If it's a scream, if it's a cry of joy, if it's verbal, nonverbal, right? In the end, God is no names and all the names and all the words that we'll ever utter, right? So it's like a way to think about it. But 70 official names of God are in Judaism, and the one that I'd like to speak about today is actually the first one that appears in the Bible. Does anyone know what that is? What's the first time we hear about God in the Bible? What is the word that is being used to describe? It's not God. I mean, the Bible was written in English, in Hebrew. So what? It's not El. It's what? Elohim. Because if you Bereshit, and the people on Zoom, if you want to speak, or please mute yourselves because we hear you. We can hear you. So let me see here. All right. So yeah, please mute yourselves. Um, unless you want to speak, and then you can raise your hand and we'll let you speak. So right. So Elohim, Bereshit, bara Elohim. When I talk to you guys and then I say a few words in Hebrew, I'm tempted to say it in an American accent, Bereshit bara Elohim, but I'm reminding myself that actually I'm actually a native Hebrew speaker and I should be saying Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So the first name we ever hear about God in the Hebrew Bible, right, is Elohim. And today, and I don't know if today if we'll need another session or two, but let's start. I want to teach some teaching about the meaning of Elohim in the Kabbalistic tradition. So one thing to notice, even before we delve into that, if you know a little bit of Hebrew, and you said El, which is God, the word Elohim, what is it? What is the grammatical format of Elohim? It's in the plural, which is kind of strange. Like we are taught that, the one God, God is one, and then when God appears finally in the Bible, all of a sudden, and from the very beginning, it's not one God, it's many, it's Elohim. What did anyone ever? What do you guys know about it? What are some of the answers that you've heard about this? Why is God actually in the plural? Or have you ever thought about it? Right. So it's an interesting concept. So even before we get into the particular teaching that or anyone on Zoom would like to address that?
Well, one thing that strikes me is that Elohim is plural, but the verb bara is singular. So there's a kind of complexity or contradiction or whatever there, that God is somehow many and one all at the same time.
Yeah. So right. So it's not like in the beginning God have created in plural, right? It's Bereshit bara. So this Elohim, which is a compound, appears to be a single unit entity, which in a way answers a lot of the complexity that we hold with God, that God is one and God is many. And if you thought that the Christians had it, complicated in their, Trinity, and we also, they believe in the Trinity, we believe in the one God. We're better than them. We're actually not, because in our Kabbalistic tree of life, God is 10. And I always told you that God is. Now I just told you that God has at least 70 names. Right. So it's the idea that the unity of God. There is a plurality within the unity of God in Judaism. The fact that God is one doesn't mean that one doesn't have different components. Right? And that is just something that it's just how it is. And we have to kind of like embrace that. In a way, it gives a lot of freedom to us. Yes.
Right. You can be one and also be everything everywhere.
You can or can't.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
The whole.
Right.
God is everywhere. God is everything.
Mm-hmm. And you can be a lot of things, especially if you're everything, right? Yeah.
Just one. You're not supposed to take 10 commandments. There's no other gods before me. One God.
Right.
Other gods at the same time.
Right. Yes. However, it's the same thing. Lo yelecha Elohim acherim al panai. Right. In other words, that word Elohim in the plural form is even in the 10 Commandments, and then we can kind of like debate what does it mean to say you should not have any other God other than me, but maybe it means specifically that any appearance or anything that you think is not God, actually bring it into God. It's not separate from God. Right? If you feel that, and by the way, even in a psychological kind of spiritual psychological practice, if I feel that some part of me is not part of the divine, I feel alienated from my own part of my own self, right? Maybe that's something, can that be brought into the divine in some kind of way? Yeah.
So a commandment that's impossible to disobey.
Yes, but we often do. Because people, would spend an entire lifetime running away from something that they can't integrate with everything else, and they suffer often unnecessarily. Because actually, just accept it, right? An example that pops to mind is like if someone has like sexuality orientation issues, but it really just accept it. That's who you are, But it doesn't have to be just that. It can be a plethora of human phenomena that right? That like, oh, I can't, I feel guilt, I feel shame, I feel, right? So similarly, from the psychological realm, if you think about the divine, right? And so the idea of a plurality of God. So God is one, but that oneness doesn't mean that God is not dynamic. That God isn't kind of like a dynamic, fluid, all-encompassing entity that actually encompasses many phenomena, which we often experience in our own human experience, and as having God of many names and no name at all, right? So that's generally speaking. And actually, the Kabbalistic tradition, when they taught about names of God, they actually meant that each time we call God in a specific name, there's a specific quality of the divine that is being transmitted to us so that we can practice to know by practicing mentioning that name or having a certain kavanah of that name. For example, when we were studying about Adonai Yud Hey Vav Hey Eheyeh, right, we learned about 3 different levels of existence: the physical world in which we live, our internal world, and then the silent, right? Adonai Yud Hey Vav Hey Eheyeh, something that we can practice and meditate and learn to know God through that practice. Today we're going to start getting into a practice of Elohim, which is going to be different and similar and similar and different. Because in the end, it's all the same, but a little bit different. Like they say in India, same, but different. Same, but different. And I've not been to India. I'm the only Israeli that I know that has a bachelor's degree from university, from Hebrew U, in Indian studies, who has never been to India. I'm like a weird phenomenon in the world. At any rate, maybe there's others, but I don't know them. At any rate, back to Elohim. Another more down-to-earth explanation you can find in the book Radical Judaism by Rabbi Arthur Green, which is a great book. Maybe we'll have someone teach it here next year, possibly. I'm starting to think about it. Someone offered me like a mini semester. Radical Judaism. You can, if you haven't read that book yet, it's a very interesting book. And one of the things that he suggests there, based on some Hasidic literature that he has read, is that Elohim is actually a male and a female God integrated. That in the pre-Torah mythologies of Mesopotamia and Canaan, from which the Torah evolved into, and when they integrated all these ancient myths into, said, well, now we're going to write a new Torah, right? There are always 2 gods. One was El, which was the sky god, which was masculine, and then there was Yam or Yama, which was the female god that represents the ocean and the earth from below. And then in some of those Canaanite mythologies, creation has been understood as a constant battle between the male and the female. Sounds familiar?
Yeah.
I don't know if every one of you have been like in a relationship with a significant other or from the other gender, or maybe if it's from the same gender, it actually doesn't matter, but it's like constant battle, right? And then they basically say that Elohim, when they created the Hebrew myth, they wanted to say that we want to create a God that is an integration between the male and the female, to represent that the world doesn't have to be this constant battle, that it can be a kind of like a holistic and more harmonized vision of the male and the female, yin and yang, if you wish, elements of creation that are together in kind of like a holy sacred dance and relationship, and not in constant battle. So whether or not that was the original intention of the ones who wrote the Bible, it's a very pretty interpretation, in my opinion, right? Of thinking of, and it doesn't even have to be just a male and female thing. Of thinking of the plurality is that when we see opposites or places of conflict or places of like two sides of something, rather than looking at the world as a battle of elements fighting, or right, we want to see it as an integration of opposites rather than collaboration, rather than like a constant battle of elements, like patriarchy, matriarchy. It's still, these things politically still follow us, right? It ain't over yet, right? In our society, Elohim would, in that interpretation, would be from the very beginning. It's an integration together, win-win.
They can't see us. We have to speak.
Hello, Rabbi.
Yes?
Isn't Adam male and female?
Yes. So, well, depending on, that there's two myths of creation in Genesis 1 and
Yes,
2.
yes, yes.
But roughly speaking, yes. And actually, in both versions, one might argue that in some way, but especially in one of them, that and there's a beautiful rabbinic midrash that the first Adam was an, how do you say that in Hebrew? Say androgynous,
Androgynous.
Okay.
right? It's also, the rabbis were also influenced by Hellenistic thought, where that the first created human was both male and female. I think we also studied that when we studied about Ani and Ein, the two nuns, that the first human being was created both male and female, and then even the famous story that God made Eve out of Adam's rib is a misunderstanding, because the word tsela in Hebrew is rib, but it's also the side. The word where this is called tsela is because it's our side, our torso. So basically, what actually, it's not that God created the woman from Adam's rib, is that he cut them on the side, like from the side, and the androgynous became male and female. So in the beginning, it was one, right? So that kind of like echoes, thank you, Lona, right? Echoes that idea that also the God that we're created in man, and that we're created in God's image, is both male and female, and that goes all the way to the deep understanding of the Kabbalistic tree of life, amongst other things, as the male and female attributes of the divine that are integrated and working in harmony or in disharmony in the world. And actually, the Kabbalists really believe that when the male and the female attributes of God are in tension and in disharmony, the world is in disharmony. And when the Kabbalists in the Middle Ages look at the status of women and womanhood in the Middle Ages, saying that basically they had no status, they said that is wrong. We need to fix that. And I wouldn't call that feminism, because that's a more, but even that idea that when you sing Lecha Dodi, you rise and you turn around and you bow to the other side. It's because you bow to the feminine attribute of God. That's the bride. Because the ark was always considered as a patriarchal focus, and then it said but on the other side of the sanctuary, bring forth Shabbat, integrate the feminine into the masculine. We still do that on the Chadodi. We don't know why, but that's the reason. Okay, so there are different, so that's a very deep thought about the human condition, history, the creation of the world, understanding that these different elements have to be integrated, therefore the plural idea of Elohim. All right, but which is not even the main teaching that I want to teach today, but just to kind of like share some of the thoughts and the beliefs that have been circulating around this word Elohim and why it's plural. Okay, so far we said, generally speaking, that God is one, but this oneness is not a stagnant, like frozen oneness, but actually a fluid, all-encompassing concept that can be understood or meditated upon or learned about in many different ways. And God can be a lot of different things for very different people, right? And bearing many different names and no names at all. And specifically, the integration of male and female attributes of the divine as core elements of creation that have to be integrated and harmonized within every human being and in our relationships and in our society. Can we move on? All right. So, yeah. So, okay. So this is something okay, this was last week's. So the word Elohim, okay? I want to start getting into some of the Kabbalistic teachings about that word Elohim, which is a compound. In the mystical tradition, derived from the book of Zohar and other places, the word Elohim is made out of two words. One is Aleph Lamed Hey, Ele, and one is Yud Mem, which sometimes, if you switch the words, can become me, right? Because Yud and Mem, which means, by the way, what does the word yam mean in Hebrew? Sea. More generally speaking, it means any vessel, any containing. So basically, when Solomon made the big kind of like sink in the temple that contained like the holy water that they used there or something, they called it yam. So why is the sea called yam? Because it's like a basin. It's like a basin. So any container can be a yam. But also, if you interchange the letters, you get the very basic question, me, which means in Hebrew what? Who? Who? I don't know how many of you have been on Friday night when I gave the sermon about the golden calf and what was the sin, right? So along the lines, I was already preparing this class, so I was thinking about that, and also it was that parsha, so happened to be. So when the people of Israel made the golden calf, right? Moses is in the mountain, right? God is there. They make the golden calf and they say, Ele, Aleph Lamed Hey, these are Ele Elohecha Israel. These are your God, or this is your God, Israel. And the Kabbalist suggests that the problem, the spiritual meaning of the sin of the golden calf is that they only worshipped part of God, but not all of God. They worshipped the first three letters, but forgot the last two letters. Because the belief is that God always has, and this is another compound, not male and female, it's something else, in divinity, and it's a little bit like the three names we've learned about. Like Adonai, something that I can see and feel and hear, physical world, and the inner world, and the mystery, the unknown, right? And that the sin of the golden calf was that also you can understand, they're psychologically alone in the desert. They need something tangible that they can see and believe. And the problem was that they only worshiped the half of God that they could see and understand and fathom. So then whenever in life, and the real, and the problem that they couldn't bear to include in their worship the mystery. Where did Moses go to? What about the unknown? So according to this teaching, whenever we kind of like take something in life that we know, that we understand, that we think that we figured it out, or that we create a certain structure that is supposed to be the answer to, I don't know, to whatever it is, and we sanctify that structure as frozen, as something that is it, and we forget the question. We forget to ask questions. We forget the unknown. We forget the dynamic element of life that always reshuffles the cards, right? We sin in the golden calf, spiritually speaking. You see, it's something that if you want to think about a sad example, when October 7th happened, in Israel, how did we not see this blah, blah, this attack, right? And people are still talking about that the leadership of Israel, the political one, the military one, were all had a certain concept of what they had understood of the enemy or our neighbors, however we want to see them, and they forgot to do what they've been doing for years, which is to ask questions and say, maybe there's another thing that we're not looking at. They developed a culture that everybody had to agree, and you couldn't argue. And if your commander said that this is so, you had to say that this is so. And then, surprise, it wasn't what we thought. But think about less dramatic examples, right? Of any time in our life when we kind of like get attached to a certain construct, right? And forget that this construct was born and created to serve a certain purpose. But hey, things move all the time. Right? There's a dynamic, surprising element to creation, and worshiping God in its entirety is actually embracing both. You can also, if you only go to the question, it could be like the other sin, right? If you only go to the me, to the who, to the question, and you only want the mystery, and you want to have no boundaries and no constructs and no structures, that can always also be a problem, right? Sometimes if you get over spiritual, right? You only want to be at the top of the mountain in that cloud, but hey, what about What about this world? What about, you do need structure. You do, right? So the true meaning of Elohim in this case, right? By the way, I'd never thought about that, but maybe that was Moses' problem. That he went up to the mountain. He was only, and he came down with these perfect 10 commandments, right? But he couldn't stand that the people of Israel needed something more tangible and more, right? And then maybe so basically the story actually holds both sins in a way, right? Aaron who stayed below, and Moses that went above. See the real idea about this compound of Elohim is that, as the Zohar teaches us, you have to be able to embrace both. Right? So these, if you say ele ha'anashim, these are the people in the room. Ele ha'mikrofonim, these are the microphones, right? It's a word that we use in like a plural. These are things that we can see and fathom and understand. Me, the question that's like, if you go inside, like I said, observe the observer, right? The unknown. Who are we? Who is God? What is the mystery? Revealed and concealed. Concealed and revealed. Any questions, thoughts so far?
So translated Elohim would be these and who?
Yeah. And yes. So, or even that which I can see and the question that I don't know the answer to. Right? That which I know and that which I don't know. Together in harmony. Okay? That is in order and that is in chaos. That I have experienced and that which I have not yet or never will, right? So kind of like conscious and subconscious, right? All those things, the ability to integrate. That's kind of like what they're talking about. And now kind of following upon a Kabbalistic teaching from the Zohar, the Kabbalists quote Isaiah chapter 40, verse 26. Lift high your eyes and see, speaking of the stars. Who created these? The one who sends out their host by count, who calls them each by name, the stars. Giving such great might and vast power, not a single one fails to appear. So Isaiah is a prophet, one of our favorite prophets, not the favorite one. I say most favorite because if you count how many haftarot are like Isaiah, it's half the haftarot. It's really one of our best quoted prophet, and not only us, the Christians too, right? Isaiah is a very popular prophet. And in chapter 40, right, Isaiah looks like we do sometimes at the heavens and looks at all the stars and the galaxies. And back in the day, there were more stars in the heavens because there was no electricity to, pollute the air at night. And I don't know when was the last time that any of you went to a faraway place that doesn't have any, civilization, and remember how beautiful the night sky really is. If not, please do so. But when Isaiah 2,000 years ago or so stands in Jerusalem and looks at the heavens, he sees all that, the Milky Way and this magnificent view. And he says, lift up your eyes to the heavens and see who created these, me. And if I go in Hebrew, s'u marom einechem, look up high, ure'u, like lirot, to see, mi bara ele, who created these? Mi bara ele. So if you understand already that, right? And like we've seen before, when the Kabbalists look at these verses, how they like to interpret it mystically, it's not really only that. It's just not really all that mystical. It's just a word game and a word play. They would always like to change the meaning of the verse to reveal a mystical teaching or a spiritual teaching, and they would often turn the question into an answer and the answer into a question. because they like to play with our minds in this way. And the medium is the message. So instead of seeing, so two things. One, instead of saying, "U marom enechem," lift high your eyes to the heavens. How else can we understand lift high your eyes? Try to lift high. Look at Eric. What is he doing? Can you demonstrate to us? Yes. The Kabbalists gave a very yes. The Kabbalists say if you want, so the pshat, the literal meaning of Prophet Isaiah is you take your eyes and you look up to the heavens, and then you look at the universe that has been created, and you say, who created? Like Frank said, the God who created this universe. But if you want to lift your gaze to the top of your eyes and roll your eyes backwards, turning inwards, that is the spiritual direction by which to seek God. Not making the literal meaning irrelevant. You can still look up to the heavens and wonder about the universe outside of you, of us, and say, who created this physical world? But for the mystics, for the spiritual tradition, no less important and perhaps more important, right, is to know to look up with your eyes inwards and look at the universe or universes and vast galaxies of spirit that exist within each and every one of us, and ask, who created these? Not the galaxies out there, the galaxies inside our mind, our hearts, our souls, our being. Right? If you wish, ever heard of Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher? The one that they say that people would be able to, adjust their hand watches by he would always go to lunch precisely at the same moment. It was a very precise kind of German philosopher. What was his big thing about that changed Western philosophy forever? Anyone remembers from Philosophy 101 in college? Introduction to Philosophy? Ontology versus epistemology? Does that ring a bell to anyone? Until Immanuel Kant came to being in Germany, I think in the 18th century, Western civilization and philosophy and theology was always busy with the ontological question of what there is in the world. What is there? How do we know that this table is a table? How do we know that the star is a star? How can we know what is this world? In philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, everybody gave their opinions. Whoever it was, for years, thousands of years. Came Immanuel Kant and said, but everything that we know about what there is goes through our mind. So we can't know what's in the world. We can only know what our mind perceives of the world. It's called the Copernicus-like revolution of philosophy. Right? Because what Copernicus, Copernicus? The guy who realized that the world, that the earth rotates around the sun and not vice versa. So similarly in Western philosophy, you can Google that. See, I'm not making it up. Basically, Western philosophy since Immanuel Kant has been struggling not with the question of what actually is there in the world, because they realized that he was right. And until today, Western philosophy has not come up with an answer to Immanuel Kant. And what philosophers ask themselves is, what do we perceive as reality? What our mind perceives as reality? Because we don't know anything about the real world other than what our mind perceives of it. It's a trap. It's a loop, right? But the Kabbalists, many, many years before him, maybe 600-700 centuries before him, are sitting somewhere in the late Middle Ages, probably in Spain, basically saying the same thing. Right? You can take Isaiah in both ways. Look out to the world outside of you. That would be Adonai, by the way, right? The realm of Adonai, and look at the physical world. Explore. Science, go ahead, explore. Elon Musk send a spaceship to Mars. Not in the good sense, right? Let's just in the kind of like, let's learn about the universe, the telescopes, right? Whatever. Look at the answers over there, right? Or the science of the mind. Like, go look inside, search inside. So we can interpret Isaiah in two ways. Uma romenechem, lift your eyes to the heavens, or lift your eyes to the heavens of your own psyche and mind and look inwards, which is the Kabbalah. And then you see, that's comment number one. Comment number two, when you do that, and you roll your eyes inwards and you look inside, you ask the question, who created these? Like when we meditate at the beginning of class, who created my body, the sensation that it has, my emotions, my thoughts, my desires, my wishes, my concepts of myself and the world? Who created these? But you can also turn the question, who created these, mi bara'ela, into an answer. The answer it is mi bara et ele. Who created these? That's a Kabbalistic way of playing with our minds. You get it? The unknown part, the question, created the answer. What we know, what we perceive, what exists, has been created by the unknown. The mystery created reality. The question that we have inside, when we kind of like go in and reach that well of unknowing, that is what created the world that we can know and perceive. So the question remains, but also an answer echoes within these two parts. There's the unknown that created the known. Is that too much for you for one day?
Yeah.
Well, let's see what echoes, how it's echoing in other people. There's more. See, do you understand this? Here's a cube, right? How is this cube created? So, which letter is this? Mem. Mem Sofit. Mem Sofit, look at this room. Mem Sofit would, for the Kabbalists, would be a symbol, a visual symbol of not the 4, but the 6 dimensions of this world. East, west, north, south, up, and down. Fred said there's a center expanding in all directions. The letter Mem, right? If we think of boundaries, that which we don't know, we know as much as our best telescope, right? We can put a telescope somewhere between here and the moon, up there in the outside of the atmosphere, and we can start taking photos. And every few weeks, you'll hear in like Yahoo News or whatever it is, CNN, right? Whatever telescope Hubble discovered 5 new galaxies and 6 new planets and realized that the universe is not what we thought. Expand your knowledge to the edge of the universe. Look for the unknown over there, right? What does the letter Yud symbolize then in Elohim? The source, the point within. If you open your eyes like Isaiah interpretation A, right? You look to the heavens and you look outside, that's Mem. If you roll your eyes like Eric did and look inwards and try to go until the origin of your consciousness, you will find the letter Yud. And all of a sudden, the Yam, the basin, the vessel that we're talking about, is not an ocean, is not a sink, a basin in the temple. It is actually our reality, where there's when there's isn't our life like kind of like an echoing of I go in, I go out, I look inside, I am real, something I'm real. Who am I? How does that translate outside? I go out to the world, I learn something about the world that affects who I am. I affect the world affects me, kind of story of our life, right?
Yeah.
From the goo goo gaga stages to the more developed or less developed stages of our who we are, right? This in-out conversation. So it's not two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. Thank you to Hannah who made this in the office today. I told her, make a three-dimensional diagram of Elohim. I had to give her a crash course, 10 minutes of Kabbalah, and she's on it. Right? So we understand that the Yud and Mem of Elohim, maybe that will help you to understand, is actually that question, me or Yam. So if you want the open Mem, it's a question. And if you want the closed Mem, it's a diagram of this universe, with each and every one of us being a center. Right? That Yud exists here and here and here. Everywhere there's consciousness. Each and every one of us. Think about this. This is actually us. Right? Mi bara ele, look inwards, trace the point of origin, the Yud, open your eyes, look outwards, is the universe. Every inhale, every exhale, and then ele happens to be in numeric value of letters. Aleph is what? 1. Hey is what? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Hey. So that's 5 together is 6. And Lamed, 30. Because
No, I didn't need to.
Yud is 10. Kaf is 20, Lamed 30. So 36. Why is that important to the Kabbalists? Because it's 6 times 6. And they're thinking about this point of origin and the universe outside, and they're sending rays from the center point, like you were saying, from the center point to the east, to the west, to the north, to the south. There's 6 of them, and then they say, like, if you take all these 6 and multiply them with one another, so Ele is not, you see, it's every motion, every relationship, every dynamic ray or axis that goes from our inner world to our outer world, and the interaction between them is symbolized by Ele. And all of a sudden we realize that for the Kabbalists, Elohim, God, is not a grandpa in the heavens, is not some, I don't know, historic God or I don't know what. It's actually a simple diagram of every moment in life, in human existence, that even atheists can connect to. That even atheists can connect to. Why? Because Elohim, and what is this? It's us having a relationship between our inner world of thoughts and emotions and perceptions, and the outer world, and in every breath, and in every moment in life, there is an interaction. Inside affects outside, outside affects inside. Thought creates reality, reality affects thought. Right? I'm thinking I'm hungry, I go out eat an apple, that apple becomes a chemical, becomes a thought. Right? From the moment we're born to the moment we die, we're in dialogue between what we seem to be the self, the I that lives in the world, to the world in which the self lives. And then when we think about the word Elohim, that's what it means according to this tradition. The ability to be aware of that every moment, or some of the moments at least. All right, 10 more minutes to your complaints, thoughts, confusions, suggestions for improvement, angry letters to the office, whatever it is that you want to do. Yeah.
You go back one
I can
image on there.
try.
Well, even that one. Yeah, that one. I think the graphic's interesting because to me it looks like a door with a handle going, so you're going in, out, back, and forth. And it's a perfect manifestation of what you're doing.
Well, courtesy and thank you to Hannah with her animation skills, which are much better than mine. Right now, we're already giving an interpretation to the diagram. But yes, I like the metaphor of the door and the handle. And maybe I'll teach you some other time a beautiful Zoharic teaching about the door and the lock and the key to that door. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question. Can you have this concept that you're just talking about at the same time as you also have God kind of above, like in the heavens?
You can do whatever you want. It's a free country.
I mean,
At least for a while. I think that for the time being, right? I think that look, whatever metaphor of God serves you, use it.
I'm just wondering if those two ideas.
So I think that some of these concepts are kind of like radical in the sense that they kind of break or maybe are kind of like previous concepts of God as a grandpa in the sky or above. But in a sense, if you think about the mem, like God is also, in other words, God is both outside of this universe and inside of our hearts in the bottom of our consciousness. So if you wish, it contains both of those. Now, see, it's kind of radical because in each one of us has the divine within, but it doesn't mean that it's only within. If it was within, it could lead to like hubris. Oh, God is inside me. But hey, God is equally in all of us, right? And God is around. So in other words, I think this kind of integrates that concept that you're talking about into kind of like maybe a more radical or kind of a complex, but also extremely simple of what is God, right? What is Elohim? God is a mistranslation in a sense, right? Elohim means every moment that I can have an answer and a question. Every moment that I become aware of the relationship and the dialogue that constantly goes between my inner perception and its encounter with the outer world and how it mutually influences one another. That is God. Yes, and I said even atheists could agree to this mystical and Kabbalistic spiritual interpretation because there's nothing spiritual about it. Only that it's also it's nothing like, it's not the kind of mysticism, oh, I'm going to climb up a ladder and see angels. And it's actually very, very simple and clear. It's just in our experience of the world.
When I think about it, because I've often thought that in the context of relationship with someone or something, that God is there, that it's divine, and I guess it's the in-out kind of.
Right. So, have you ever heard of Martin Buber?
Yeah.
So Martin Buber, who was a existential philosopher, Jewish, who developed an existential philosophy that not only Jewish people learn, based on the I, thou, or I, right? Judaism as a dialogue, relations, right? His philosophy was that God is in the dialogue, and that the only way actually to feel the divine is to understand that every dialogue that I have in the world, whether it's with another person or another being, or even an idea that I have inside my mind that I have a dialogue with, right? Is when I remember that it's the divine, the divinity will be there. And Martin Buber based his philosophy on Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings. He did not, these are the teachings that he kind of decoded and deciphered and translated into a language of existential philosophy that other people can understand. Right? So yes, a lot about it is dialogue. Mm-hmm.
So how did the Kabbalists understand, like, so much of the Torah says, follow God's way or else, it's terrible things are going to happen. How would a Kabbalist read that?
Right. So on one level, we have to know that the concept of God has evolved throughout generations. Even if you follow the Bible itself with all its books, you will see that the very kind of like angry God of like Exodus or the book of Numbers is not the same God of like Ecclesiastes or of Prophet Isaiah or or Lamentations or whatever it is, right? Even within the biblical era, which, actually the Bible is like a library written over 1,000 years of Jewish sources, right? So you can't expect all the Hebrew. God has evolved throughout even the biblical time, but then came the rabbinic era and all of what happened, and then for the Kabbalists, we're already like in the 12th, 13th century. It's actually not. There's already a lot that has happened, and in fact, much of the radical teaching of the Kabbalists, in fact, in a way, come to eradicate the biblical God in its simplicity and suggest other models that are actually very different, which is why you don't just teach Kabbalah, you put it under code. That you have to be a little smart and a little bit witty to kind of actually, and they actually cover what they say. And it's a lot of the mystery is because if that people actually understood what they were saying, either that would like undermine their like the rabbinic authority of the time, or that they would become heretics and be burnt at the stake, right? And to say that God is actually Elohim is actually a conversation between our inner world and our outer world in every breath, but actually not a grandpa in the sky who punishes, not an external force, is kind of radical in a more conservative society. It's even radical to how many of us have been brought to think about God, which is why I'm interested in these traditions. Right? So one answer is that yes, actually, it's not the same God. And there's more than one way to understand, and we have to understand that what our tradition teaches us about the divine is very different than what we were taught, or even in what the Bible says. That's on one level. It actually is radical and different. Yes, that's why I bother to teach it to you on Wednesday nights. Okay, really, it's not. It really is. That's kind of like one answer. Another answer is that the Kabbalists would say precisely, we have to understand that this God, which is actually awareness and being focused and practicing every moment as a dialogue, as a potentially sacred dialogue between us and another. If you astray from that, you will run into trouble. If you forget that there is divinity in that encounter, right? If you start to see the other as someone that you use and abuse, rather than also created in the image of God. If you neglect yourself, if you lose that center, if you forget that center is actually not supposed to be stagnant, but it's actually always dynamic and always expanding. If you get confused to think that it's one directional, it's only coming from Yato to the world, but neglect to understand that it's reciprocal, or the other way around, you will get into trouble. You see, so you can actually say that in a way that in fact the Kabbalistic teaching of the evolved God does not negate the Bible, only that it's not a grandpa in the sky, right? And some would argue that actually this is what they've intended in the first place, that it was never a grandpa in the sky. It was actually always that, but people forgot somewhere along the way. So pick and choose which answer you like the most. Right? We have 1 more minute, so one more complaint.
I was wondering in Isaiah 40, does that also tie to Bereshit?
Yes. Yes, they actually. Yes. Yes. So the bringing of Isaiah, and we can go. I can take you into that next week. It's a beautiful, beautiful Zoharic interpretation that actually starts with Bereshit bara Elohim. Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, heaven and earth. By the way, not what we think, the earth and the heavens, but the earth being the physical world, the shamayim, the heavens being the inner world. Okay, we can go get back to that. I don't want to. We can learn about, right? So and basically, and when they say, and they actually say, yeah, Bereshit bara Elohim is Bereshit is me bara. In other words, yes, it's so you're already becoming a Kabbalist in training, in the making, right? So you can mix and match all these verses, and then all of a sudden, if you see that word, you'll never read the Bible the same again, especially if you read it in Hebrew, right? Yeah. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yes. Yeah.
We do have hints of this God. I mean, what's Moses doing talking to a burning bush? What is going on with Moses in up on a mountain, in the clouds?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you couldn't join last week because there was some problem in the Zoom.
Yes, we did have a problem. Yeah.
So actually, when we had maybe, I don't know if they already put that YouTube, but you can try to watch last week's, because we were talking
Okay.
about the origin of the name Eheye
Okay.
that Moses learned in the burning bush is precisely the Aleph, which is the unknown,
Oh, okay.
and the Heye, which is known. So I agree with you 100%. In
Mhm.
fact, once you start to learn how Kabbalists look at the Bible, and you go back to the literal teaching of the Bible, you often say, "Oh, it was there all along." We just,
Right.
you're right. So it actually does not negate, right? So the notion of God has evolved, but it does not eradicate the Bible. It just comes to add another level of our understanding of what spirituality, what the divine source is. Okay, and again, and by the way, the Kabbalists would tell you all these concepts, this box, this cube, this yud, this lamed, these words. You see, it's also can become a golden calf. If you can say God is who created these, if you fall in love with it, it should be a little bit like the Buddhist monks, who make these intricate mandalas, and they write in colorful sand, and they work for like a week to build all these Buddhas, and then you know what they do? They take a brush and they erase them. In other words, all these constructs, unless we fall in the same sin, right, or mistake, use that as a platform for your meditation. Use that when you breathe. Use it as you live, but never. By the way, speaking of the 10 Commandments, Lo ta'aseh lecha pesel v'kol tmuna. Do not make a picture of God. We just did, right? We just took the Kabbalists took the word Elohim and made it into a 3-dimensional mandala that we're supposed to be in and meditate upon. That's how we use it. But use it, but erase it. Use it as a platform to get somewhere. Don't make that into God. All right?
Buddhists would say don't cling.
Don't cling, or non-attachment. It's only a tool. It's only an educational tool that someone smart in Spain 800 years ago meditated, had this realization, wrote in a book, so that we 800 years later can learn about and maybe utilize it in our own spiritual development. But that person would probably tell you, use it and lose it. Right? So again, in the end, the essence of God is silence and no concept at all. Right? So next week, do we have class? Let me think. Next week, no. Next week, I will be in Chicago in a conference. So no class. The week after, there is class. Look at I gave you the dates. It's also on the website. Then I'm going to, in other words, follow the dates. So I can't be at all places all at once. As much as I'd like, and as spiritual as we are, not possible. So I'll be in a reform. It's called the CCR annual conference, schmoozing with all my reform rabbi friends. How is your congregation doing? They're terrible. Like we have to vent to each other. They're obnoxious. You can't decide what you pray at the high holidays. Like it's the most important thing in the world. Oh my God. Oh, really? Mine too. So hopefully I'll come a little more relaxed and happy, which I already am relaxed and happy, but even so. So you guys enjoy the rest of your week. Maybe see some of you Friday night or hold a bagel or whatever it is. Saturday morning, not to forget Saturday morning. Thank God we have many opportunities to meet. All right. So thank you once again for being part of the ROSH-ESTHER tradition, and peace and love to all of you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Zoom as well. Bye.